Hello and welcome to the Other Team's Tunes Tuesday, an interview series that discusses music and matters with queer artists you love. I'm your host, Maud Mosley. My pronouns are they, them, and joining me this week is Toronto-based punk band Bad Waitress. Thank you so much for joining me today. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
My name is Moon. I go by they, them, he, him pronouns, and I am the drummer of Bad Waitress.
I'm Nicole. My pronouns are she, her, and I play bass in Bad Waitress, and we're really happy that you want to talk to us.
Awesome. I'm really happy to have you here. I was so excited, briefly meeting you all in person for the first time. And that's how I was introduced to your music, through your fashion, interestingly, when I just was like, oh my gosh, what is happening here? These are the coolest looking people in the world. But yeah, no, it's such a joy that we can connect again. And I know your debut album, No Taste, was released in 2021, so almost a year ago now. And many of the song's lyrics, touch on various forms of escapism, be it through physical distance, interpersonal relationships, or substances. When performing and coming back to these songs, how does it feel to be, consistently returning to those kinds of sentiments?
Oh, yes. I I guess over time, like the for speaking for myself, once you kind of go through those first set of feelings when you're writing songs, and for Callie, I imagine you kind of get to a point, then it's you're not in those same places anymore, from where those certain things kind of touch base, and then kind of evolves more into another piece of the story, but learning how to not stay emotionally attached, but in the sense of when performing it, though, still tapping in, but not per se, like yeah, I don't know, for me personally, even with my own solo songs and stuff like that, there's certain time that I wrote those, but I'm very different person from that point in time, if that makes sense. I don't know, but yeah, I guess my way of doing it is just building a character when I perform on stage, and that's my interpretation, my physical interpretation of what those songs kind of bring up and stuff. um yeah, I don't know, sorry, that was a little
No,
roundabout way
yeah.
of answering that.
No, I absolutely hear you. Almost just when we come back to perform these things, the feelings aren't necessarily as raw as when you wrote them, but it's also so interesting that you bring up creating that disconnect, but also not too much of a disconnect that you still can't pour those emotions into the performance.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Nicole, did you have anything you want to speak to in relation to that?
I was pretty spot on, I think. Just yeah, when you write the song initially, it's pretty raw and unfiltered. And then it's nice to be able to revisit that from maybe a more like processed point of view when you're playing the song later on. So you can still revisit those, thoughts or feelings or memories or whatever, but you don't necessarily have to engage with them in such a wildly emotional way. You can just think about them more logically, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you did mention, Callie was doing a lot of the writing. Do you find the
Mm.
writing in Bad Waitress is very much like a single person's responsibility, or does everyone, pitch in ideas or different songs written by different individuals?
We do a little bit of everything. Definitely Callie lyrically is the main songwriter. There is one song on the album that Nicole wrote the song and brought it to us as standards. But yeah, generally, like we will either it's during rehearsal, and one of us or a couple of us kind of start jamming on something, and then it gets built, and then Callie builds the lyrics on top of that. Sometimes Callie will bring a pretty much a couple of verses or chorus or something, or a riff, a guitar riff, and then builds it off of that. Like Strawberry Milkshake, for example, I think she just was trying to think of like colors. So she thought of like, okay, like pink, and like, okay, like sweet, like ice cream, and like trying to like play around with words. Like I know that's like another way that she writes sometimes. It's not necessarily always like super personal. But a lot of it does get taken from like life experiences that she's had over the years. And like, especially with this record, there's like a good mixture of those things, and also like commentary, like social commentary and stuff too. And, you know, like all that fun stuff. Yeah.
In terms of like songwriting too, I think we like to like change it up a lot.
Mhm.
We're writing a bunch of new songs right now, and we were kind of like stuck on this one part. So we decided to just kind of like, you know, play like the verse before it and then take turns one by one, just like starting a jam from that verse to
Mhm.
like see if we could make like a chorus that would stick. And then, you know, it's we kind of each got to try out like our version of what would come next, and that was cool. So we're always trying to like think of like different ways to kind of like stretch our creativity, and see what we can write.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, I love hearing more about your creative process. And I mean, from how many like different angles it comes from, you know, really not sounding like you have this like singular idea of like somebody writing lyrics, then putting music to those lyrics. So then, you know, finishing a song. So that's really great. Also, I'm so excited to hear that you're writing a lot more songs right now. On the side, you know, are we working towards a new EP, a sophomore album? Is there a plan for that?
Yeah, I guess it would be our sophomore album, the second record. That's kind of the goal at the moment. So we're just throwing a bunch of ideas at the wall, and we're like, okay, this is cool. All right, that's not so cool. And like kind of going through that songwriting, like building process. But yeah, it's exciting. Like, because we have been, I mean, we've been playing the songs off like the first record, like No Taste, like for quite some time now, even prior to releasing it officially to the world and stuff. And it's nice to now be like in a place of like building some new ideas and kind of seeing from our experiences in the last couple of years what's gonna like kind of come out of that for like a second record. So yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. Are you noticing a lot of differences between like working on your first record to working on the second one?
Y- yeah, yeah, most definitely. Uh and kind of like we're we're trying to really like push ourselves to like kind of leave our comfort zones a little bit as well, and then kind of just seeing what naturally kind of comes out of that, because we're generally like, us as like a group of people, we love like all different kinds of music and like kind of pull inspiration from a lot of different places. So it's yeah, it's kind of like fun, like just like challenging ourselves now and sort of seeing like where that's going to go. But yeah, I feel like it is different because I mean, where we were at like a couple of years ago is very different than where we're at now as like a group of people and as individuals and as a band and stuff. And, you know, so yeah, definitely different for sure. It's like, just like going through the evolution, right? Like expanding.
I think with like the first album too, we were all figuring out how to write together. Like I
Mhm.
had just joined the band when we started writing those songs, so like I was still figuring out like that chemistry between all of us. And then I think with this like new album that we're writing, like we know what works, like we know how to write together. So there's like a nice mix, I think, so far of us like knowing what we're good at and like being able to just like knock it out real quick. And there's also like, you know, this other part of like us knowing what works and knowing what we're good at, but then just kind of like shoving that aside and trying stuff that we haven't tried before and trying to, yeah, like Moon said, challenge ourselves and push ourselves into like new ways of doing things. But it's nice now to just, yeah, have that baseline like chemistry and like rapport with each other of like, we know, you know, how we all kind of work as musicians all together.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's really exciting. And I mean, I can't wait to see like how that comfort and being able to experiment a little more and leave that comfort zone really comes through in the songs whenever we may be able to hear them. I definitely can't wait. But going back to, I mean, the songs that you mentioned, you've gotten so used to performing, in this year since No Taste came out, and having performed it before then. And I mean, speaking about all that performing, your long awaited release party for the album is happening soon and will have happened by the time this interview is released. But in terms of that, what are you most looking forward to, coming back to that event so long at this point after the release itself?
It's actually kind of nice to have, even though it's like unconventional, to have the album release party, 6 months after the album has been put out. This way, at least, people have been able to like listen to the album. They have their favorite songs off the album. They've been able to like see all the music videos. We've been able to like do a bit of touring. We went to like South by Southwest. We toured in the UK in May. So like we've been able to kind of like spread what we're doing a little bit more than if we had just had it in the fall of 2021 like we had originally intended. So it's kind of nice that we've hopefully been able to like garner a bit more interest and attention and fans of the album to like help celebrate us or celebrate it with us. And it'll be really good to just like finally play it for everyone in the flesh as it deserves.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Moon, what do you feel like you're most looking forward to?
I mean, honestly, like Nicole touched base on most, like on everything. Yeah, I'm just excited to like be able to share it with everybody and like celebrate it the way that, because we put so much work into this album and these songs like over the last couple of years, and just gonna feel like, the like marking of like the end of that chapter officially, which I'm looking forward to, like because it opens up like a new phase of us as a project and as a band and stuff like that. So it's gonna be nice to just feel like, okay, cool. Now this is like, it's like the bow on top of everything. And you're like, nice, all right, like, and yeah, I'm really excited to share it with our friends too and stuff, and like just keep it going and like be able to like share that experience with everybody. Yeah. So
Yeah, I love that perspective of kind of like wrapping it up, tying a bow on it, and also that perspective of people celebrating you. Like I know you changed it to celebrating like with you, but I hope like it's also awesome that people get that opportunity to like celebrate you and just the amazing work and music that you are putting out there for the world to like enjoy and get involved in is so awesome. And speaking of moving towards that new chapter, you have released new music since the album, which is super cool. And that was your single Spit It Out, which came out this year in 2022. And with your mention of South by Southwest, a lot of the music video was clips from that trip, mixed in with this like really funky 90s aesthetic, and also the lyrics drawing on some of that tongue-in-cheek you were mentioning regarding like this idea of kind of standing out and like drawing people into like being like a bad influence in some kind of way that, I don't know, queer people also often just like get labeled as that for like existing and people wanting to be like you because you're super rad and they're just like, oh no. But do you find, regarding those kinds of sentiments that you bring up in this song, do you feel like you get a lot of that when, taking up space or simply existing in and outside of the music industry?
Like that we're bad influences?
Like that, or just like, the way sometimes people like perceiving you, saying like those things about you, watching you in certain ways.
I don't know. That's interesting. I feel like I've never like, usually the things that people are like saying about us are in that regard, in us like being outspoken and like being kind of crazy and like acting like idiots, and like also being like, you know, women and non-binary and trans and queer, like that's I think been like pretty celebrated from like everyone that we've spoken to, because it's fun, and people, I think most people like want to celebrate those parts of themselves, and like being able to like see that in us gives them a chance to like connect with us and connect with themselves, and like be okay to like act silly or like dress however they want, or like say the things that they've been thinking but like haven't really like had the guts to say yet. So I think like I haven't really heard much like backlash or anything about like that kind of stuff. But I don't know, Moon, do you have any thoughts on that?
Um, I it's always like a hard question to articulate, I guess for me. Answer why. Yeah, honestly, we are very lucky. I feel like, especially when we first sort of started kind of coming out a little bit more in the scene and like evolving as people, and like, you know, it's like a public setting as well, right? You're like on stage in front of people, you're putting your work out there for people to like see and absorb and like, you know, and kind of process in their own way that they're going to do. And it's been really nice to see that it has been a very positive like response for sure. And I think also there's a lot of other bands that are also doing like those same things around us and continuing that like ripple that's been happening for a while, especially within like our scene and stuff in Toronto. um yeah, I mean, there's always going to be like some like undertones of certain, you know, people's discomfort and their own like projections of how they like things that are just like, I don't understand, so I'm going to be like about it, right? And I'm very grateful that the way that we are as a group of people, we give ourselves a lot of space within our band to be like, fuck that, we're just going to be ourselves, and like if something happens, we'll deal with it accordingly in the moment. And like, but thankfully, usually people are pretty awesome, so I'm extremely grateful for that. um I think like for me, one thing that's been kind of interesting is just like, because I only really like just in terms of like our gender identities and stuff in the band and that kind of thing, like it's been, I think the I guess the only thing that's been kind of difficult is like how to communicate that to people sometimes, because that like kind of happened like for me personally in the past couple of years, and it's constantly evolving. And there's so much more to the conversation than just gender, though. There's like so much more to it. And right now we're like in a point where that's kind of like a big topic of conversation. Um, there hasn't been like backlash per se, but sometimes it's difficult, like when you're navigating newer spaces and people don't know yet, and then like how to talk about it. I think that's the only thing. So it's not really like a backlash thing. It's just more like navigating like kind of change sometimes, like as you change as a person within a band, and like language, and how do we um you know, like just to address that with people. And in certain settings you feel safe to do that, in others you don't, right? So I guess like that would be like the only thing I've been thinking about a bit more in the last couple of years, just because we're kind of going back out there again and going on tour and like being in different spaces, and then figuring out like for me personally, like when I feel okay about like broaching that subject, and usually it's fine, right? So, but yeah, I guess that's like the only thing maybe. I don't know if I'm totally off the mark here, but
Yeah, no, I mean, thank you for speaking to that. And I mean, it is really amazing to hear that, like, overall, it's this really positive experience where, you are able to be presenting and existing, as your most authentic selves, and thereby
mhm.
also, encouraging other people, giving them permission to do the same, at your shows, or if they're playing with you, touring with you, any of that. Like, that is awesome. But also, yeah, absolutely. Like, thank you for speaking to the fact that it's not always positive, or it doesn't always seem as safe. And I think, as you were mentioning with this more positive ripple, I think, and I'm not sure if these have been your experiences, but it's been interesting to see that, people are so excited about like diversity in music, but sometimes that still gets just toned down to talking about like awesome woman bands, and so many non-binary musicians constantly have to come forward and be like, we are
Be like,
not
by the way,
an all-woman band, like,
they're like,
and
sorry. I mean, we love them and like amazing, and like I love the women in my band, and I like me and Caitlin, you know, like non-binary, and like our, you know, like our representation of like just, you know, fuck gendered like boxes. But yeah, exactly. Like just yeah, sorry. I interrupted you.
no, you were adding to the point. That's fantastic. But yeah, that's such a common experience. And like just watching musicians have to keep coming forward and being like, we are not a band of entirely women. That's super cool for bands who are, but like we are not that, like what you were just voicing. And it can, you know, it's strange because when that happens recently, it's like balancing the best of intentions to be like, oh, we're trying to cover this like diversity in music, well, absolutely like erasing people's identities.
Yeah, that's the ironic part. It's like always that constant battle of that, right? Because of how used to we are of doing things in a very specific way. And then marketing gets involved, and like, how can you sell this idea? Right. So yeah, like within that structure, people get left behind all the time and get erased from the conversation. So yeah, it's like uplifting, and then you're like, wait, but then there's always other people around that are just like, oh, but you have to like kind of like really force your way in there just so they remember, which is part of it, right? That's just like the reality of being human, and us coming from very like all different walks of life and places and contexts and stuff like that, right? But yeah, it is. It's interesting because I obviously like we support it and stuff in these initiatives. But yeah, it's like exactly like how do we then incorporate the other side of the conversation so then people don't feel like they're putting more work into it and then exhausting themselves as well. Like you're feeling like you have to fight for something. It's like, well, no, I'm part of this too. And like I could, you know, I could say whatever the fuck I am, whatever I want. That could change. It could change tomorrow. Like, but we need to allow that, like, be mindful of that, and like, how do we build that space? Yeah, which I feel like we're very much in that process with a lot of things, like just in general, I think, but especially within the arts and music, figuring out, okay, what's the next piece of this? It's like, okay, great. We're talking about this. Now, what are the other nuances and elements that are also attached to this conversation? And then eventually getting to the point of like, doesn't matter gender, sexuality, like how you see yourself, like where you're from. It's like those things will be celebrated and there'll be space for it, and people won't feel like they have to constantly explain themselves, because it's like, holy shit, who fucking has energy and time to be constantly explaining your fucking self, you know? And that's just like anything of being human, like, and it's very fluid and it changes constantly. And that shit is scary for the world we live in. They're like, oh my God, things can change. Everybody's freaking out. It's like things are changing all the time, whether you're paying attention or not, right? So yeah. Anyway, sorry.
No need to apologize at all. Oh my gosh. No, those conversations are so necessary. And I promise you, I was like right there with you and anyone watching this, as far as, you know, who I know this series appeals to, everyone's like, yes, exactly. I feel like to like end on a hopeful note though, you know, because I feel like so many of us are exhausted by, you know, those conversations,
yes,
those
yeah,
topics, and like
yeah,
having to just either defend or even just explain yourself, even like to people with the best intentions who aren't like attacking you, but just having to like explain or educate in so many scenarios where that's not actually really like your responsibility or necessarily a fair expectation of you, you know, as you continue to be a band, put out music, tour, and have these like, you know, components happening. Do you feel like you have a lot of hope for like the local music scene to be like moving in that direction? Are you seeing that happen?
Yeah, oh yeah, I definitely, it's already happening for sure. At least within like the people that we know and types of like bands that are coming out and have been around for a while around us, and like kind of growing up together, and these conversations being had within like our own, like privately with amongst ourselves, but then also like when you go to shows and you're chatting with people and like certain conversations and things that come up, and like you definitely, like I definitely really truly do see that change. And I think just continuing that on, and like us just being ourselves and like cultivating these spaces, I think like I have hope for that, and I see it happening in real time, which gives me hope. And I think just continuing forward, like continue what we're doing and growing constantly. And I think that that is the ultimate like answer, I guess, to that right now. And that like we're already doing it. We just have to keep on moving forward within that. And then, yeah, sorry. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's it, Nicole.
Yeah, that's pretty spot on. I think you're right. We just have to like keep carving out those spaces, and like, yeah, it's like you said, like exhausting having to like keep explaining who you are, but at the same time it's like that's, I guess it's like part of the gig as like a part of like this generation of musicians. But like for the generation after us, like women being in bands is going to be old news, you know, non-binary people and trans people being in bands is going to be old news. And like less people in like the next generation will have to explain themselves, because we're already kind of just like setting the bar for like, you know, this space isn't just for like cishet white dudes. So like I'm totally down to like help just keep articulating that until like eventually within like the next few generations, it doesn't even really need to be said, because it's just like
happening.
accepted as part of what the deal is, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's good. And there's already been like so much progress made, I think, in like the time that I've existed in this music scene. And it definitely gives me hope to just be part of like such like a loving, open-minded, accepting community.
Yeah, we're very lucky, honestly. Like, so I know for some people that's not necessarily always the case. So it's happening. It is possible. It exists. Yeah, that's a nice hopeful. That's good. I think that was good.
Yeah, that was that was incredible. And just, oh my gosh, just so many beautiful messages and like motivating notes of hope to end on. I feel like it's so easy to feel hopeless this day, that like these days, that even like hearing that from both of you, I'm like, yes, you're right. Good things are happening. Like it can be really easy to forget that. So I mean, just knowing that other people are seeing it, witnessing it, or being like an active part of that change, and whatever scenes that they are in and wherever those scenes are at, pushing it forward to something that can always be better, and just like a more wonderful and safer and like celebratory experience for everyone. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, because being human is actually wonderful. Like there's a lot of whatever garbage out there, but being alive is awesome. We need to celebrate that more. The other option is really boring, like, I mean, maybe not, we don't really know what happens, but you know what I'm saying? Like we need to, celebrate being alive and like making it to another fucking day. That's pretty amazing. It's something to like live for, literally. Like like
Yeah, absolutely. Also now I'm just like, no pressure, obviously, but I'm just imagining like Bad Waitress merch that just says like being alive is awesome.
Oh my God, yes. We should get like coffee mugs made.
Oh my God, yes.
I love that. That would be the best way to wake up.
Being alive is awesome.
Like a mantra for your morning.
Yes, I love that. Especially because like the punk world's always been so like live fast, die young, where it's just like, no, being alive is awesome. Like, let's be here. Let's do another day.
For real, because it's like you only have one life, you might as well just like milk it. Just squeeze that fucking rock dry. Like, you're not gonna get another chance, so just kick it while you're here.
Exactly.
Hell yeah. Oh my God. I adore it. I adore it. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this week's Tunes Tuesday. This has been such a pleasure. And I know we're moving through some like tougher topics, but I'm so glad we got to end in this, just like incredible, joyful, getting everything out of life that we can place. If you want to check out any of the past music that we have been talking about, or stay tuned on social media for any of those future releases, watch the music video we mentioned, you can find all of those links below. And I appreciate you both so much for being here with me today, and Bad Waitress will be playing us out.